This video will cover the update for Groomer's tool version 14. A new curve toolkit is introduced. We now have a mini toolbox that contains many commonly used functions stored in this UI. The curve toolkit can be docked to the side or the bottom of Maya interface for quick access. This way we can have access to the main tools, as well as the curve toolkit altogether. We still have the random select curve tools, where we can tag some selected Maya curves and randomly select them based on a percentage. The pivot to root button is also available from both the main window and the curve toolkit window. The color we are seeing right now is actually from the Maya curve color tool. It allows assigning color to Maya curves for better visibility. For the following demonstration, we will need to use the coloring tool to lock all layers except for the green color layer. Just to recap, if we wish to make adjustment to groups of curves, we can always turn on the batch mode. This is simply Maya's soft selection with object mode. With this, we can now do transforms on selected curves with a falloff. When we are done, just make sure that we turn the batch mode off. The CV selection buttons have been updated. Let's take a closer look on how it works. I am going to isolate just the orange layer for this demonstration. Let's say we are working with a bunch of curves that's very close to each other, and we have some CVs selected already. Using the next or the previous button, we'll move the selection up or down the curves. In this update, the number of CV selection will be retained. For example, let's say we have 3 CVs selected. Using the buttons will now move the selected CVs in groups. This may be useful when we want to fine-tweak curves from top to bottom, especially when we have a lot of curves and it can get lost quite easily on which CV to select. The Normalize button is now on the toolkit, as well as the Quick Rebuild and the Smooth buttons. We also have the curve length functions from the PFX tool added to the curve toolkit. This is useful for dealing with shorter hairs. Use the average curve button to set all the curve to their average length. The Get Length button will display the average length on selected curves. Let's make one curve shorter, and matching the length of other curves to that curve using the Get Length and the Set button. Also, we have the ability to mirror over X, Y or Z with a click of a button now. Just a note, if we are using the coloring tool, duplicated curves will not get its thickness. To fix that, just add the curves to the layer. Next, we have the Maya Lattice function added. In grooming, sometimes the lattice tool can be used to quickly adjust the overall shapes of a group of curves. Using the lattice tool can be a really fast way of doing so without having to adjust it one by one. When we are done with the lattice tool, just select the curves and click on Bake Lattice to remove the history. The Hair Tube Builder has received some upgrades as well. For those who are using it to create 2D graphic style hair, we can now preview the strands with a ramp shader. When we wish to change the color, please do so on the Layer button. It will take the color picked and assign to the ramp shader. To enhance the graphic preview, you can now also assign a Paint Effects outlines to the selected hair strands. If we wish to get to the Paint Effect node, we can find it inside the hair strand group. From there, you can adjust the thickness, color, and all settings as desired. If needed, multiple Paint Effect outlines can be created. We can see now we have a second Paint Effect node in the hair strand group. But what if we want to assign existing Paint Effect node? Simply select the strands, and we can find existing paint effect nodes at the bottom of the shader menu. The thing with selecting the paint effect node is that it will highlight the geometries, which makes it hard to see the adjustments. We can click on the Copy tab button, and we will now be able to make adjustments without highlighting the paint effect geometries. When creating and moving strands to another layer, the shader will be retained now as well. The renaming layer has also been updated. We can now simply press the Enter on the keyboard to confirm the rename. Inside the editor, when we change the path curve spans, the CV will be displayed now. The curve CV rebuilt based on length is now very simple. We no longer have to tag curves. Simply select the curves and drag the slider. It will give us the preview as before. When we are happy with the result, click on the Rebuild button to confirm the rebuild. We can also key in a value in the field directly, without having to drag the slider, and turn on Rebuild on originals if we do not need duplicated curves. This ability comes with a caveat. We need to confirm the operation by clicking on the Rebuild button. If the Rebuild button is not clicked, the curves from the previous selection will still be triggered. We can either close the UI, reopen it, or simply click on the Rebuild button to move on to the next batch of curves. Enhancement and improvement has been done to our Curves Extract tool. Before, when hitting Ctrl-Z to undo the operation, we get some of the residues left over. The undo was not clean. In this version, undoing the extraction is now cleaner. Also, if we have extracted a tube or card already using the Extract button, to do it again, we can now use the G key on the keyboard to repeat the extraction process, without having to click the Extract button again and again. The Copy-Paste Curve tool has also been given an update to the workflow and functionality. Let's use the Add Curve tool with middle mouse click to plant some straight curves. Sculpt a curve a bit. Let's move some curves away from the base mesh for later demonstration. Select the sculpted curve, and let's click on the Copy button to set it the reference curve. Next, select the other curve and click on Paste to paste the shape. We can see now the shape has been copied over. What if we want to keep the orientation of the curve based on the underlying mesh? This is when we can switch to the With Orientation mode and add a reference mesh. When a base mesh is added, the tool will now use the underlying face normal as the direction. We can see now when the curve is copied over, we now will have a curve using the normal of the underlay base mesh as its orientation. Now, if the curves are too far away from the base mesh, it will not be copied over. The tool will only take in curves that's within 0.01 unit away from the base mesh. This is to avoid unwanted shape distortion, like we had in the previous version. When a curve is close enough to the base mesh, it will now be copied over. This limit is only when we use the With Orientation mode. If we use the default mode, the curves can be copied over no matter the distance. The Curve Clump tool has been rewritten with simplified and more user-friendly control. We now have a simple rebuild button and an auto rebuild checkbox added to the UI. The ramp curve is also properly updated to mimic the clump shape as well. In order to clump curves together, the curves need to have the same amount of CVs. We can see there's 6 spans on this curve, and only 3 spans on this one. When trying to clump curves that have different CVs, and if the auto rebuild checkbox is off, we will then get a warning that the curves need to have the same amount of CVs. We can manually rebuild the curves, and they will be clumped. We can also reduce the strength of the clump by moving the tip higher. To save more time without having to worry about matching CVs, we can just turn on the Auto Rebuild checkbox. The Auto Rebuild will take the highest CV count of the selected curves and rebuild all the curve with that number. Just to refresh the modes in this tool, we can either choose to clump the curves to the center of selected curves or to the last selected curves. The XGen Snap Guide tool allows us to quickly snap XGen guides to cards or tubes geometry from external softwares like DAZ Studio or Vroid Studio. To get in curve extractable cards or tubes, we can now utilize the PolyResolve tool to do that. Once we have the cards prepared, we can then create a center curve for each selected card. In some cases, we will need to check and reverse the curve directions. Now, if we were to manually move the guide to the curve close to it, doing it one by one will be quite troublesome. With the curves prepared, we can now simply select the XGen description and the curve group. Then, click on the Batch Snap Guides button at the bottom. We will have all the guides snapping to the closest neighboring curve. However, a few guides misinterpreted the curves they should be snapped to. In this case, simply select the guide first and the curve, and click on Snap Guide. Just like the Curve Clump tool, we can also set the snapping strength in the ramp provided. The Curve Color tool now has a CV and EP toggle button added. To display the CVs, we have to make sure the curves are already in a Curve Color tool layer. The renaming of layer is updated, so now we can simply click Enter to confirm the renaming process as well.